Deep in a forest where the trees grew so thick that sunlight barely touched the ground, there lived a tiger who never roared. Not once. The other animals mocked him for it. They called him weak. They called him broken. Some said he had simply forgotten how. But the tiger wasn't broken, and he hadn't forgotten anything. He was waiting, and what happened after years of silence would teach every creature in that forest, and everyone who hears this story, the one lesson most of us never learn until it's almost too late. Silence is not the absence of power. Sometimes it's where power is being built. Part 1: The Forest of Noise. In this forest, status was loud. The wolves announced every kill with long, echoing howls that carried across the valley for miles, making sure every creature knew exactly how strong they were. The peacocks paraded through the clearings, fanning their feathers for anyone who would look. The hyenas laughed the loudest at everything because volume, to them, was the same thing as confidence. And then there was the tiger. He moved through the forest like a shadow. He hunted alone, at dusk, when the light was low and the forest was quiet. He never announced his kills. He never postured near the watering hole to intimidate the smaller animals. He simply existed, on the edge of everyone else's attention, doing very little that anyone could see. Word spread through the forest that the tiger was afraid, that perhaps some injury, some past humiliation, had silenced him permanently. A young fox once asked him directly, with the blunt cruelty that only the young possess, "Why don't you ever roar? Are you scared of the wolves?" The tiger looked at the fox for a long moment, his amber eyes calm, unreadable. "I'm not scared of the wolves," he said quietly. "I'm just not finished yet." The fox didn't understand. Neither did anyone else in that forest. But there's a kind of animal and a kind of person who understands something the rest of the world doesn't. That the ones who need to announce their strength are usually the ones still trying to convince themselves of it. Part 2: The Humiliation. To understand the tiger's silence, you have to understand where it came from. 2 seasons before this story begins, the tiger was young, not a cub anymore, but not yet in his full strength either. Confident, maybe overconfident, the way all young creatures are before life teaches them otherwise. He had challenged the largest wolf in the forest over territory near the eastern ridge, a stretch of land rich with prey, water, and shelter. He remembered thinking, in that moment, that his size alone would be enough. It wasn't. The wolves didn't fight alone. They fought as a pack. 6 of them surrounded him at once, striking from angles he couldn't defend, wearing him down not through individual strength, but through coordinated patience. He fought until his legs gave out beneath him, until his pride was as torn as the wounds across his side, and finally limped away, not dead, but humiliated in a way that cuts far deeper than any physical wound. For weeks, he hid in a den at the edge of the territory, healing slowly, listening to distant howls of wolves celebrating a land he once thought would be his. And here is the moment that changed everything, the private moment nobody in the forest ever saw. Lying in that den, wounded and alone, the tiger did not decide to give up. He also did not decide to charge back out and try again immediately, the way pride so often tempts the wounded to do. He decided something quieter and far more dangerous to anyone who might one day cross him. He decided to become someone the wolves had never actually fought. Not a louder version of the tiger who lost. A different tiger entirely. Part 3: The Seasons of Silence. What followed was 2 full seasons that, to anyone watching from a distance, looked like nothing at all. The tiger didn't fight anyone. He didn't challenge territory. He didn't roar, posture, or compete for status the way every other predator in the forest constantly did. Instead, he trained, alone, in silence, where no one could see him fail and no one could see him improve. Every dawn, before the forest fully woke, he practiced moving without sound, learning to place each paw so precisely that even dry leaf beneath him barely stirred. He studied how shadows moved at different hours, learning exactly which times of day made him nearly invisible against the treeline. He studied the wolves too, not with resentment, but with the cold, patient attention of a strategist. He watched how they moved as a pack. He noticed the gaps in their formation, the split-second delay between one wolf reacting and the others following. He noticed that their power came entirely from numbers and coordination, and that a pack, no matter how large, still had to obey the instincts of individual wolves who could be separated, isolated, and outmaneuvered one at a time. He built his strength differently too. Instead of the reckless bursts of aggression that had defined his youth, he trained for control, for the ability to strike with maximum force in the smallest possible window, then disappear before a counterattack could form. None of this happened quickly. None of it happened visibly. Weeks passed, then months. The other animals in the forest, when they thought of the tiger at all, thought of him as a fading memory, the one who lost badly to the wolves and simply never recovered. The peacocks continued displaying their feathers. The hyenas continued their loud, mocking laughter. The wolves continued ruling the eastern ridge, growing more confident, more careless, more certain that nothing in that forest could challenge them. And the tiger continued waiting, saying nothing, becoming something none of them could see. Part 4: Why Silence Frightens the Weak. Let's pause the story here because this is the part every viewer needs to actually absorb, not just here. In the forest and in life, there are two kinds of strength. The first kind needs an audience. It performs. It postures. It roars not because roaring accomplishes anything, but because the roar itself provides temporary relief from an inner uncertainty. This kind of strength is loud because, deep down, it needs to convince itself as much as it needs to convince anyone watching. The second kind of strength doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't need applause, validation, or an audience to confirm it's real. It builds itself in private, indifferent to whether anyone notices, because its purpose was never to be seen. Its purpose was to be ready. The tiger's silence wasn't weakness. It was the second kind of strength, quietly assembling itself while everyone assumed the story was already over. This is exactly why so many people misjudge quiet people. Quiet effort, quiet discipline, quiet ambition. We live in a forest of our own, full of wolves who howl about every small kill, full of peacocks fanning their feathers on social media, full of hyenas laughing loudly at anyone who dares to try something and fail publicly. And somewhere in that noise, there are always a few tigers. People who got humiliated once by a failed business, a public rejection, a devastating loss, and instead of announcing a dramatic comeback, simply went quiet. Not defeated, retreating inward, training in private, becoming something the world hadn't seen yet. The mistake almost everyone makes is assuming that silence means surrender. It rarely does. Part 5: The Drought. By the start of the dry season, the forest changed in a way that tested every creature within it. The rains that normally fed the rivers and watering holes came late, weeks late, and the entire ecosystem began to feel the strain. Prey grew scarce. The watering holes shrank into muddy puddles. Every animal in that forest, predator and prey alike, faced the same brutal question. How do you survive when the resources you depend on simply aren't there anymore? For the wolves, the drought exposed a weakness nobody had considered before. Their strength, numbers, coordination, a pack that hunted together, required enough prey to justify hunting as a group. As prey became scarcer, the pack had to split their kills across more mouths, weakening every individual wolf even as their reputation for dominance remained intact. The peacocks, all display and no substance, struggled the most, having spent their strength on appearance rather than survival skill. The tiger, who had spent 2 seasons perfecting the ability to hunt with minimal movement, minimal noise, and maximum efficiency, needing far less to sustain himself than a coordinated pack required, barely noticed the drought at all. This is the part of the story the forest would remember for generations. While the wolves grew thinner and more desperate, arguing amongst themselves over dwindling kills, the tiger continued moving through the shrinking forest with the same quiet precision he'd built in isolation. He needed to prove nothing to anyone. He simply needed to survive, and he'd spent 2 silent seasons ensuring he could. Drop a comment below with the word waiting if you're in your own quiet season right now, building something nobody can see yet. Like this video if it meant something to you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And remember, the loudest creature in the forest is rarely the most dangerous one. Sometimes the tiger is simply waiting.